Hey folks, welcome to the TOGAF workshop with System Architect. This workshop was given at Interconnect 2015. It was given in Innovate 2014. We've made modifications to it for the 2015, improvements to it. So the goal here today is to go through some of the introduction to the workshop that we normally do when we give it face-to-face. So you can listen to these slides, this recording of these slides, and then take the workshop exercises. And so we'll go through in stages. There are various labs, so you can listen to the recording and then do some of the lab exercises and then go back to the recordings. I think we'll do it in segments. So let's go. Let's start up. My name is Lou Valveris. I'm Community Practice Lead with IBM for Enterprise Architecture. And today we'll start with a lab intro, and we'll go through the TOGAF preliminary stage, the Open Group Architecture Framework, and then we'll take a break and you'll do some lab exercises, and then we'll talk about business architecture and then service layer and information systems architecture, application portfolio management, and analysis. So first slide, we talk to a lot of clients and building enterprise architectures, and we have new clients as well who are just getting into it, and so I paraphrased an email from a client who said, "We get asked on a regular basis, usually at the last minute, for artifacts that describe the business. The information is served up in PowerPoints and Excel spreadsheets, assembled in a scramble. There's no correlation between the artifacts. We don't know where the documents came from, who owns them, how reliable the information is, nor what it doesn't show." Right, and so these are requirements for why an enterprise architecture is useful in an organization. Also, another requirement, we need a delivery mechanism for this information so it's served up in a self-serve manner. You can't be asking the enterprise architecture team for a report and then wait for them to provide you with a report. Right? You need to have an architecture that end users can ask it questions. We see that all the time as a requirement from our customers. It's not necessarily the enterprise architect or team that's asking the architecture questions. Sometimes it's other folks in the organization. Another customer quote and a recurring topic of conversation at Innovate in 2014 and 13, our EA thread, with disruptive technology such as the cloud and mobile, the EA team, even in this case at a formerly state healthcare company, is being put in the spotlights or the headlights, depending on how you look at it. The CEO wants to know how the company can react to demand for mobile and cloud technologies and how to utilize these technologies for advantage. What are the solution alternatives and cost? What's the impact on the current business? What's the risk to the current business? And the CEO wants that information as soon as possible. So again, you're in the spotlight as an EA team, but you're also in the headlights, depending on how you want to look at it. This is another slide that it came from a customer, and we've genericized it, but we see this a lot of our customers using EA in this way, and essentially the enterprise architecture is that repository of information at the center, and you're harvesting information from various sources of record, in this case business capabilities, infrastructure, application portfolio, could be spreadsheets, could be CMDB tools, could be security tools sniffing the network. So you're harvesting that information into a central store, and then you're also bringing in potentially business processes, core business processes. You're modeling them either in the enterprise architecture tool or in some business process modeling tool, or even in Visio or Microsoft Visio, and getting that information into this enterprise architecture repository. The repository itself needs to have an ability to have a metamodel that is very customizable to great breadth and depth, so that you can customize it to capture this information, this varied information that's coming in. It also needs to be able to be queried with a reporting engine that enables you to understand discrepancies of information, how things tie together, and to harvest that and serve it up in dashboards and ask it questions, be able to ask it questions. So you can see in the top here, the EA Operations Center being able to surface that information in a web client or other means so that the readers can ask that enterprise architecture questions. And then you see reference models there. A lot of EA teams are trying not to reinvent the wheel and using reference models to start up an EA effort to understand what the industry is using for service architecture or standard business processes. You have reference models like APQC and the U.S. Federal Enterprise Architecture Framework and various other reference models. Telco has the TM Forum models, etc. And then here you're using the enterprise architecture in the bottom right for governance of solution design, and then you're also using it for project prioritization and planning and building out roadmaps of your transition plans for applications for various other aspects of the organization. So that's the kind of the architecture of the architecture at a very high level of how enterprise architecture is set up. So let's talk about TOGAF, the Open Group Architecture Framework. TOGAF has at its core a content metamodel for what you should be capturing, and then also it has extensions for various aspects of an organization that you may wish to capture. Governance, services, process modeling, data modeling, infrastructure, and also motivation. And so those are the extensions to the TOGAF core. And there's an architecture development method, and this is it. It's the ADM, and it is guidance, essentially guidance on how to do enterprise architecture, starting off with a preliminary phase, understanding what you want to capture in the architecture, the vision of the architecture itself, how you want to stage that architecture, what the EA team is going to be, what it's going to consist of, what framework you'll choose, what information, what data sources you'll be using, your sources of record. And part of that vision is to understand how you'll stand up that architecture, what you'll bite off, and how you'll show return on investment early on so that you can get more buy-in to the architecture and then spread it through the organization. And then you have business architecture and information systems architectures. Again, this is guidance. Some people start off in C or D and then work back up and bring in business architecture. And as you're building this is an iterative process. Then as you start to build that architecture, you can start to look at opportunities, solutions, migration planning, use it for governance of solution architecture, and then also phase H here, which is very important, understanding the how to manage the architecture itself, because the architecture itself will be growing. You may be using multiple repositories, and you have to understand how you will manage that, and that's part of the TOGAF write-up. This thousands of pages of information in the open group for TOGAF on the website on how to do all of this. So here are some call-outs. The TOGAF specification suggests different things to capture at various phases. It also suggests reports, they call them catalogs of information that you would be capturing and understanding, and also diagrams to visually see parts of the organization. So that's all in the TOGAF specification, and we'll swing through this. And again, I mentioned this is an iterative process. This is a nice slide to show how you would be iterating through this. And we've had customers spend some time here just understanding that architecture effort, getting buy-in, executive buy-in, understanding what you'll be capturing early on, what the EA team will consist of, what your sources of record are, what your framework is, how you're going to customize that metamodel. Metamodels continue to be customized as you go forward, as you understand new sources of record and want to add information into the architecture. And that was a theme at our EA thread in Innovate in 2000. 14 and 13, how metamodels themselves are constantly changing. And so you need a tool that enables you to do that. And so you'll iterate through these stages, and there's, again, no set process here. It's guidance. The goal is to show the return on investment in enterprise architecture, show the value in analytics, show the value in cleaning up sources of record. Sometimes you'll use the EA to go back to that owner of a source of record and say, I feel there's something wrong here because the information that you have isn't correlating with other sources of record. Show the value and visibility so that other parts of the organization say, I want some of that, right? And EA becomes systematic in the organization. And so here's the core content framework of TOGAF. It is essentially the head bone is connected to the neck bone is connected to the backbone of your organization. At the high level here you see capabilities related to work packages that deliver new capabilities to an organization, and these things here in the upper level are associated with everything in the Metamodel of the organization. Business functions, business processes. You may establish a business service layer, your applications, your technologies, platform services, data, right? Application component is what TOGAF calls applications, because applications may consist of various components, and the same thing with technologies. So this is the core, basic TOGAF metamodel. And then there's an extended one. As I mentioned before, that slide that showed that there are extensions for various things like data and services and governance. If you add some of those extensions, you add to the metamodel. And if you remove those extensions, you remove from the metamodel. And so it's adjustable in that way. And so here you see, for example, information system services added. If you add the services extension to TOGAF. And so a business service may be a manual service, it may be an automated service, but an IS service, information system service, more of like a SOA service. So if you're modeling SOA services, you may want to add the services extension. And in a tool like System Architect, you have options to just turn on or off extensions at any time to add or remove layers of the metamodel. Right? You can see here logical and physical application components, for example. Some users do not capture logical application components, and some do. System Architect, for example, is a physical application component. It has technology components like a SQL Server underlying database that you may choose to use. Then you also have the notion of a logical application component. So System Architect is an enterprise architecture tool. Right? And you may have many enterprise architecture tools in the organization without even knowing it. You may be having people use PowerPoint for modeling enterprise architecture and feeding that into the enterprise architecture System Architect. So logical application components enable you to understand what's out there better. Right? So this is the extended content metamodel of TOGAF. And then beyond that, we see every customer that we have customize the base TOGAF metamodel to capture information that exists in their sources of record, right? And so every customer is different. The sources of record are different. In this lab, we've provided some customizations for you that we'll use for analysis. We'll use to capture sources of record that we bring in. So, for example, we've captured disaster recovery properties for applications that, in our example, our IT department is maintaining. So for every application, they know if they have a disaster recovery plan in place for it. If it's a full disaster recovery plan, DR, tested, it's not tested, or that maybe there's no information on it. Then from an application portfolio analysis tool, we're capturing for an application whether it's been decided to keep it, enhance it, upgrade it, or retire it. All right, so we've extended the metamodel to capture that information in the EA tool. Location risk, flood zone, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of locations of our organization. All right, and we've customized the Metamodel to capture that. We also have customer-facing processes for business processes, and then also strategic value of functions, high, medium, low, again through some analysis that was done on the functions of the organization that exists in a spreadsheet that we're going to bring in, low-hanging fruit, into the enterprise architecture. So I think that ends the first introduction into the workshop. So now what you'd want to do is start System Architect that you've downloaded. You should have a set of student files in a folder, and follow the instructions in Lab 1. And then in Lab 2, you're going to create an EA repository, which System Architect calls an encyclopedia. You're going to select TOGAF. You're going to turn on and off a couple of extensions in the advanced properties. You're going to turn off services, so you will not be able to model IS services. For example, you can turn it back on later. And then we'll ask you to also turn on two extensions for infrastructure modeling. So IBM has gone beyond what TOGAF specifies for applications and technologies, physical applications and physical technologies, to capture infrastructure details that you'd normally pick up in a CMDB tool, such as application version and device instances. And you're going to turn that on. We're going to use that later in the lab. That's basic customization. Then we'll also have you import a user props file, user properties file, that will provide you with some of the extensions I just showed on those last two slides for details of some of that exist in those sources of record. So without further ado, go do those labs 1 and 2, and then come back to the video if you choose to see the introduction into the lab beyond that, the business architecture. All right, thank you.